here's where the data comes in. What skills do we need in 5 to 10 years? Like, what skills do we need in the workforce today? Where do we see the workforce going in 5 years, in 10 years? And what's our skills gap? And how can we start hiring not just for what we need today, but for the capacity for where we need to be in 5 or 10 years. So absolutely looking at what the data and the projections from a sales and marketing and business strategy, and how does that shape the future of the skills that we're going to need in 5 years. And that's where HR becomes the strategic partner that we really truly should be in an organization.
Joanne Taylor is a senior HR leader who drives value to businesses with her expertise in human capital management, project management, consulting, and employee engagement. As Vice President of Operations for Clear Employer Services, she collaborates with her clients' leadership teams to assess organizational readiness, influences and supports business development, and advises them on change management strategies for technology deployment and adoption. Joanne, welcome to Voices of HR.
Berta, thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you so much for having me today. I look forward to a great conversation.
Oh, and so do we. And this is going to be a great conversation because we've never had someone on the podcast yet who talks about data and manufacturing. So you're the first on that one. And I know you have a lot of great stories to tell our Voices of HR listeners. So let's start here. So the US has had this aging baby boomer population for years, but yet most companies are unprepared, particularly those in manufacturing. Tell us why.
Well, that's such a great question, Berta. I think that with many manufacturing companies, the history has been the workforce is a workforce that is a fixed workforce. They're steady. They show up. They're reliable. They work every day. They don't have aspirations of career development and career growth. So they've been at one company for so long. So the tenure of an employee in the manufacturing sector tends to be 20, 30, 40 years of service. So when we look across our manufacturing sector, we see the baby boomer population increasing in age, and they make up the majority of the manufacturing workforce. So why have we not become more prepared, even though we know these trends? I did a study 10 years ago on manufacturing, and the headline news was the manufacturing workforce is aging and employers need to get ready. Boeing did a study, and this was many, many years ago, and it showed that of their skilled machinists, more than 40% of them were over the age of 50 and quickly approaching retirement age. And yet we're still not filling the skills gap and the talent gap in manufacturing. And part of it is because I think many employers are relying on the fact that employees are working longer. They have a steady workforce. There's no crisis. They can call mandatory Saturdays and the baby boomers are going to show up and work on Saturday. So there hasn't been that call to change management. And perhaps that's HR's, responsibility to really drive that kind of burning bridge, if you will, and create the need for change.
I think you are spot on because HR is in the best position right now, post-COVID, to really take on some of the bigger strategic agendas when it comes to their people. And you just laid the perfect foundation for a really great conversation around Gen Z and Gen Alpha that is entering the workforce, and they are very different than the baby boomer population. So whereas you just said you call a baby boomer, they'll come in on a Saturday, the Gen Z or the Alpha will say, I have plans to go to a concert. I have plans with my family. I can't make it today. what are employers to do in manufacturing? Like, how do they attract that generation?
It is, and I see it across the industry today. And we're really talking not specifically
Mhm.
in the manufacturing sector, but this bleeds over into the logistics companies and kind of like the blue collar kind of workforce,
Mm,
that companies are doing very creative out of the box things to try and attract the younger workforce.
mm,
I've got a logistics company near me that just built a full court basketball court outside of their, logistics distribution company to try and attract and retain the younger workforce. But I feel like the gimmicks are only going to get us so far, right?
mhm,
Because when a Gen Zer enters the workforce, and this is where we can start looking at the data and what drives not just getting the employee in the door, right? Not
mhm,
just the recruitment and the talent acquisition piece, but now what creates an onboarding experience for a new hire that makes them want to engage in a long-term relationship with
mhm,
that employer. And to some extent, now we have to look at the collaboration and the working together of the generations in the workforce. And you've got this workforce that maybe they've been on the job 10, 20 years, and they have to train a new person and then train a new person and then train a new person because the turnover,
mhm,
is just a revolving door. And HR is exhausted because we have to hire 25 for every 10 open positions that we have, because we know that kind of ongoing, and it's a cyclical process, right?
mhm,
So it just perpetuates itself, when sometimes I think we truly need to take a step back and say, how can we prepare the workforce that's in place for a new generation of
mhm,
workers? Because now it's educational, right? Now it becomes, we get it. They're not going to work like you've worked. We get it. We've
yeah,
raised a generation that's going to enter the workforce differently than you did,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
You sucked it up. You showed up for work
yes,
every day. You got up in the morning at 5:30 and packed your lunch and got in your car. And
mhm,
we're dealing with a different generation with different needs, right?
mhm,
And so part of it is taking your current talent. And I think sometimes we just move too quickly, right? We don't take the right
mhm,
steps to prepare for what we need to lay the groundwork, right? We
mhm,
just can't bring in a new generation of employees and expect that the same things that worked 20 years ago are going to work today. Like it's like there's a book, right? What got
yes,
you here won't get you there.
that's
And it's
exactly right.
very much the
With
same
a
with the
big
generation.
ol' exclamation point, right, on the cover, yes, because you just keep reading in the popular press and all types of research, and we're gonna talk data here in a little bit about how manufacturing firms can use their data to and HR can use it to attract and retain talent. But what we keep seeing over and over in the popular press is that this generation will vote with their feet if they don't like what they're feeling, seeing, if you did not propose or talk about your company in the same light as reality. So if they are having a different experience than what they've been sold on the front end, they're out. They're saying, I'm done.
Yes. And I think, to your point, this generation, whether it's the Gen Z, whether it's the Alpha generation, they've been so heavily influenced by social media. And I think the data
Hmm.
shows
Yeah.
what that has done to them, whether it's hardened them, whether to some degree it's made them extremely sensitive to
Hmm.
criticism and feedback, right?
Hmm.
This is the generation that has been bullied on social media, and
Hmm.
they've sat in their bedrooms and can say anything completely unfiltered. Where
Right.
now they're coming into a workforce, and we have an expectation that people are going to know how to communicate one on one with a filter,
Hmm.
not with a texting or social media kind of presence. And it definitely creates some clashing of
Hmm.
the generations. one of the things that studies have shown about this generation, and this is one of the shocking statistics,
Mm,
60% of Gen Z is currently under medication for some
mhm.
type of mental health issue.
Yeah.
So whether it's anxiety or depression, and that if employers don't take that statistic
Mhm,
and talk about how it plays out in how we onboard employees, how we train employees, how we tweak our patience level and the way we deliver feedback to employees, you're right. That's when they start voting with their feet.
mhm.
They might be easily offended on day 2 and they're not coming back.
They're not. And they have options today. And employers are no longer looking at a very short stint at an organization as a mark against them, right? When they apply for a different job, because everybody needs these workers in manufacturing. It's almost as if A, we were unprepared, and B, our technology, which we have such great technology today with AI, just hasn't caught up. So, how do employers that are listening today, how do they take the data and exercise it to help them make a case for attracting and retaining this new generation, this new workforce? And anytime I look at data, I always encourage my executives, and I'll be anxious to see what you encourage as well. You have to know what questions you're going to ask it. And so, let's lead us through maybe the top 5 questions that HR should be asking of their data to attract and retain this new generation, to keep these manufacturing plants open, and to make it a success for everyone.
The most interesting statistic when I walk into a client site and take a look and start digging into the data that they have, a lot of companies don't have a ton of systems in place where they're capturing their own data, but
Mhm,
most companies can measure their turnover, right? So if we're looking at, and this is one of the key kind of performance indicators that I look at when talking to a client, is if we look at your employee turnover, hopefully you've got some technology where we can drill down by manager or by department, see where
mhm,
your turnover is coming from, but also within what time frame. So we know that if your turnover, 60% of your turnover is coming in the first 3 months, let's look at our onboarding process. Let's
mhm,
look at that experience. If it's happening in the first week, okay, now we need to go back a little bit further because now maybe it is the way that we're interviewing. Are we not setting the right tone? Like HR has a job to do and it's fill positions. And
mhm,
if HR is measured on time to fill, sometimes the incentivizing of filling positions takes precedent over setting the right tone where
mhm,
employees have the right expectations of what they're getting into when they start, the position.
mhm,
So some of that data we could look at time to fill, like, and a lot of companies do measure that from an HR perspective because that's what gets rewarded, right?
mhm,
We can't run overtime one more week. We need to get these positions filled.
mhm,
Boom, HR delivers. But what's the cost?
mhm,
So those are the two, like from me, from a data perspective, most companies do capture that data.
mm,
Now, if we go a little bit deeper, I tend to look broader and look not just at the company's data, but to really do some data across industries and
mm,
look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Ton of information out there based on industries. You can get so much data out there. If you are a company that doesn't have your own internal data that you've collected and can look historically back on, broaden your lens. Data's out there and it's out there for specific industries. And I have found time and time again, what's true as the trend is true for the 30, 40, 50 employee company that I'm talking to. They start
mm.
nodding their heads like, yes, we're experiencing the same thing that the industry trends show.
So if they have data, take a look at your turnover and dig maybe 1 or 2 steps deeper to really pinpoint where that turnover is originating. And if you don't have your own data on that, I would say probably start collecting it. But in the interim, go out to the Bureau of Labor Statistics that is rich with information.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
I think too, there's so many good technology platforms out there, and technology is ever evolving in the world of
Mhm.
HR that, we're really able to deliver some technology solutions that start taking into effect even gamification, whether it's through
Mm,
recruiting platforms. You know, I think again, think of what you can do to break your current process and
mhm,
and not do the same thing that we did 10 years ago that worked, because it might not work today.
mhm.
So, you know, it used to be that we could call up applicants and schedule interviews.
Yeah.
Nobody picks up their phone today. Like if
No.
you're not texting, if
Yeah.
you don't have I don't know how else to say
Isn't that
it.
so true?
So you'll see that, and like even in your, applicant tracking systems, you want to make sure that your applicant tracking systems have that kind of interactive, do we have texting capabilities? Can we push out, scheduling options to applicants to speak the language in the way that they want it delivered to them, and that the way
Mhm.
that they're comfortable communicating?
So you have also said that when you look at the data, you also need to get a little bit more strategic about filling those what you call high priority roles, right? These may be roles where there isn't a talent set out there to draw upon, that maybe you have to train them and maybe it's over a period of time. And then all of a sudden you have these individuals retiring, taking that information and all of that experience with them. So would that be the second piece of data that you would go after? Or is there something else that HR should focus on?
I think that is a good one. And it truly is one of the challenges in HR today, is getting the statistics to measure some of the
Mhm,
effectiveness of what we do. So whether it's, we like to talk about succession planning. We like to talk about training the next generation. We like to talk about, learning and development programs with very little tools in place
mhm,
to measure the effectiveness of these programs. And I think that hurts HR from a strategic perspective. Every other business, tier, every other business sector in a company can
mhm.
measure the effectiveness of their programs. Sales, did they sell more? Yep, I can prove
Right.
it. Our sales
Yeah.
increased 20%. Marketing, yep, we saw, this much more delivery.
Mhm,
Production, yes, we now increased our production 20% per labor hour, right?
mhm,
Everybody can measure their effectiveness except HR in some of these really important, strategically focused, critical roles within the organization. And yet we struggle to measure the effectiveness. So
mhm,
when you talk about, how do we replace these skills that have come from on the job training of 20 years of tenure? We can start and put into motion a training program. We can have, our high potential employees identified. But now, how can we measure the effectiveness of putting them through a learning and development and career pathing kind
mhm,
of strategy if we don't have the steps laid out along the way,
mhm,
and the opportunities for those employees to advance within the company? So, career pathing, in my opinion, starts the groundwork to start measuring our effectiveness in some of our strategic planning. And I'll say that in the event, like, it used to be, you might want to come to work as a machine operator and you're fine being a machine operator for the next 20 years.
mhm,
Well, today we might need to incentivize people more with more kudos and more attaboys. And maybe we need a machine operator apprentice. And
Mhm.
then now after 6 months, we're going to move you up to a machine operator level 2. And then we're going to move you up to a senior machine operator. And where we used to have a first shift manager that maybe managed 30 people on the shop floor, we might need to create some opportunities for people to, grow their leadership skills. So maybe now we need to put into place some team leader positions that can, shadow the first shift manager and really learn and start experiencing how to lead people and develop those leadership and skills that we're working on training so hard to develop.
I think one of the things that you're hitting on here is something else that I keep hearing over and over with all of our previous guests, which is this generation, A, wants micro promotions. They want to see that their efforts are being rewarded. And number two, they want learning and development. They want to continue to progress. And like you said, whether it is the same machine operator for 20 years, right? There's always something to learn. And so how are you going to help them continue to progress, whether it's in one position or as they continue to ascend in your organization? Because now you're competing not only with all the other manufacturing organizations, but with the gig economy, with Uber, with right? Because they can do so many other things where manufacturing used to have, I would say, a corner on that market.
Exactly. That's right.
So
Yep.
learning and development, number two.
Yes. Oh, and I think for this generation too, it is, they have a strong kind of social presence. Like,
Mm,
so the more that you can personalize what they're doing and tie it back to the betterment of society. And I'll give you an
mm,
example. Maybe you make rope. Maybe you're in a company that, is a rope manufacturer. Have pictures of kids on tire swings,
mm,
show employees that what they're doing every day contributes to the betterment of our world, whether it's
mhm,
through environmental impact. A lot of companies are going through green initiatives, and this generation truly is, that's where their heart is in
mhm,
the environmental movement. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is so important to this
mhm,
generation. And
mhm,
because they've grown up in the most diverse generation in our history.
mhm,
So for them to walk into a manufacturing environment where, you know, um, 60, 70% are men,
mhm,
very little diversity within the workforce. Women in manufacturing are getting more common, but are
mhm,
still the minority
mhm,
population within manufacturing. I think only 1 in 4 leaders in manufacturing are women.
mm,
So I definitely think that as we change and shift the landscape, we will be able to recruit a more diverse workforce into the organization. But I think that's really important to this generation.
mhm. And it's probably important too for succession planning, right? Because you first have to retain them and promote them, but you also have to be the caring organization that you're talking about in order for them to want to stay and want to move up and take on greater responsibility.
And I think to some degree, it's how, you know, it's much like raising a child, and it's developing your talent within your organization,
Mhm,
because you have to give the kudos along the way and you
mhm,
have to build them up.
mhm,
So I think that part of building a workforce is just that message of not just what their impact is on the business today, but to educate them on how to grow the business in the
mhm,
future, and show them that they have a future with your company, and
mhm,
almost paint, like, give them a path, right?
mhm,
Interact with your employees. What are their, aspirations for the future? Do they want to learn? Do they want to grow? Do they want to cross train? What is it that you can help them do along the way? And I've said this to my own internal team here at Clear Employer Services, because I brought interns into to work with us, HR interns,
Mhm.
uh, and I've always said, if there's a place for you long term, we definitely want to help you build
Mhm.
your career here. And if not, tell me what I can add
Mhm.
to your experience that will launch you in your next career move, right? Because I'll
Think
support you whatever you want to do.
think of how lucky this generation is too, because so many of us who never had someone ask us that question, right? It was come in, work your 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and then we'll consider you for a promotion, maybe. And you might get on the list, maybe. And now this whole generation has multiple people, not just their boss, but HR and so many others caring about their career progression. So when can you give our audience a specific example of how you helped an employer maybe identify their next gen talent, maybe their leadership talent, maybe their succession plan, something that a story maybe that you could share that could help them?
Most, the story that comes to mind is really with an organization that I had worked with that was a manufacturing company of about 150 employees.
Mm,
And similar demographics to exactly what we're talking about, right? So, an aging workforce, looking at the next generation, they were shifting their own mix of products and how they were distributing products. They were moving more from manufacturing as being 80% of their business and distribution being 20%. They were kind of flipping that, and it was partly due to being unable to fill the manufacturing positions, but they were
mm,
doing more sourcing from overseas, the products, and switching to an 80% distribution mix and to an 20% manufacturing mix. And really looking at where we found here's where the data comes in. What skills do we need in 5 to 10 years? Like, what skills
mm,
do we need in the workforce today? Where do we see the workforce going in 5 years, in 10 years? And what's our skills gap? And how can we start hiring not just for what we need today, but for the capacity for where we need to be in 5 or 10
mm,
years. And I think that was one of the biggest success stories, because we did an analysis of, okay, you're right. Today,
mhm,
we're hiring people that can stand and watch a machine and hit the stop button when they see an error or a
mhm,
quality problem. In the future, we see technology, because now we're going to need more forklift operators. We're going to need more
mm,
inventory control specialists. We're going to need, so absolutely looking at what the data and the projections from a sales and marketing and business strategy, and how does that shape the future of the skills that we're going to need in 5 years. And that's where HR becomes the strategic partner that we really truly
mhm.
should be in an
Yes.
organization.
Yeah, because I suspect, when you think about hiring and you think about retaining and upskilling, that could be part of the question that you ask your data is who should we? Who can we upskill? Who has shown maybe that skill set not in their current position, but they're exhibiting it in other ways?
Yes. And to not overlook the people who can upskill in areas outside of leadership.
Mm,
Some of the technology on the market, whether it's Nine Box, there's a ton that
mm,
can help you identify those individuals who might have the potential to move up within the organization, have a different skill set, and kind of move and grow with the
mhm,
organization. But many tend to be focused on those with leadership skills, but you also
mhm,
need, some other skills that might be developed. So not just overlooking people that might not become leaders in your organization. They might not, become a manager or supervisor or, that type of leader, but they can become more of your data analysts and your people that really work behind the scenes with the numbers and, just in different areas of the organization.
How do you use data to find them? So, if you have the career path put together, but let's say in your example, the business is changing, right, over a period of time. So, I suspect you have to start putting things in place to collect the data that you're then going to have to analyze or document or something, right?
Yes. So a lot of organizations, and it's easy in HR to post a job, right? You go to
Yeah.
Indeed, you go to your applicant tracking software, and maybe it posts it out to 100 different free job boards. You're on
Mhm.
Hot Jobs, and you're on this one, and you're on that one, and it's easy to spray and pray. And sometimes we do that, right? Like we got to get this job posted. We've got jobs to fill, and
Right.
without the really strategic thought behind
Mhm.
everything that we just talked about. If we're
Right.
looking for the talent that has the ability to develop new skills in the future, maybe posting jobs on Indeed isn't going to get us where we need to be.
Mhm.
And maybe we need to get out and rethink where we should be.
Mhm.
In manufacturing, maybe we need to be at the VOTEC schools and, collaborating with our technical partners out in the community who this generation is interacting with already and kind of go back to our roots, of relationships, right?
Mhm.
Um, Obviously social media is a big deal in recruiting. And I think that capturing that data of what our social, and this is where, from my perspective, we work with our marketing team, right?
Mm,
So HR should work with marketing because
yes.
marketing knows how to capture
Always.
all that data.
Yeah. They do. They do
Don't
like data.
exactly.
Mm,
And don't think that HR should not operate as an island, right?
right.
If these are truly strategic partnerships that we have within the organization, we should utilize all of our partners within the organization. So when I say tap your marketing team, I really mean it. They can
Mhm.
help you. They're out there on social media. And if they're not, you're probably missing the boat a little bit, but they're the ones that are, tweeting and, getting out there and interacting in a different way than HR has interacted with applicants in the past.
Absolutely. So as I'm listening to you, I'm pulling together all the ways that HR can use data. But what I hear, the overarching theme of what you're sharing, I think, is HR, elevate your strategic acumen. Data is the how, but you need to help understand the why behind it. And the why really leads you back to your strategic plan. Where is the business going? And once you understand the strategy, then you can start implementing data science and cultivating the data to help you get to where you want to go with your HR plan.
You said it beautifully because it's true. HR's talked so many years about getting a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we've made immense strides,
Mm-hmm.
right? But now we need to truly drive the business forward with the human capital initiatives that we are at the table to
Mm-hmm.
deliver. And
Mm-hmm.
not only do we have to deliver, but we have to show the tangible evidence, which is data, that
Mm-hmm.
we have delivered.
Absolutely. So let's try to run through and wrap this part up for our HR pros that are listening. So look at your turnover. Look at your roles where you maybe have aging population that have a deep experience and skill set that may be part of replacement in the future. You're going to have to start training. L&D program, have to look for that. Succession planning, And I really feel like 2, 3, and 4 are all kind of combined, right? As you look at your aging population, what you need moving forward.
Exactly. And I think too, prepare your existing workforce. They've got to be on board
Mm,
because as new people walk in the door, they
mhm,
can't feel the cold shoulder from the existing
mhm.
employees.
Very well said.
You've got to, everybody's got to embrace them. And, I hate to say it, love them the way they are, but that
Yeah.
there's a piece of that that is real. And,
Mhm,
we have to, as a workforce, deliver. It's
mhm,
like one of my pet peeves is the adage that HR owns corporate culture.
mm,
We can lay the groundwork,
mhm,
but man, culture is everybody on the same
mhm,
page, collectively,
mhm.
creating an environment where people want to come to work.
Absolutely. It's everyone's responsibility. Yeah. All right. Well, we could keep talking about data and manufacturing for hours, I'm sure, but we are going to wrap up this part and we're going to move into something we call rapid fire questions. So these are one sentence questions with one sentence answers so that our audience gets to know you a little bit better. Are you willing to play?
Sure, let's go.
All right, let's do this. What's the biggest challenge HR leaders are facing today?
I think we've talked about it a little bit, and it's the ability to measure and deliver data that backs up their effectiveness.
What are bad recommendations you hear in HR being passed off as best practices?
Oh, I think I said that one too. I think it's I think it's
We've
that
already
HR.
covered it.
I know we covered it. HR owns culture. That's it,
Mm.
it completely drives me crazy.
What's your first 90-day playbook as a new head of HR? What would you recommend they focus on?
Let me say that I believe that the 90-day playbook absolutely must be established during the interview process. If you wait
Mm,
until day one, it's too late. You may have made a mistake, because your 90-day playbook may be very different than what the company expects. Part of looking and making a good match in human resources leadership positions is getting to the root of what does the company want? Do they
mm,
want someone to come in with a vision for HR, or do they want someone to come in that can execute on their vision of HR? And until you understand the answer to that question, you better not say, yes, you accept that position and you
mm.
are not ready to build a 90-day plan.
Perfect. When you get overwhelmed, how do you refocus?
I have different strategies. Go for a walk, call a
Mm,
friend, get a cup of coffee, turn on music.
love it. What's the main takeaway you want to leave with our listeners today?
Oh, I think the main takeaway is we have such an exciting profession that we have chosen to engage. And there is so much value that we can add to organizations. Like, we play such a critical role, and don't sell yourself short and don't fall into the routine or to the administrative, you know, necessary evil that HR
Mm,
can tend to take on. Really just pave the path for future HR leaders and continue to, build our profession up and be seen as the professionals that we truly are, that are building businesses, building talent, building careers, and making an impact.
love it. Today, we have been joined by Joanne Taylor, Vice President of Operations for Clear Employer Services. Thank you again so much for joining me. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks so much for watching. We would love it if you shared your thoughts on any of the topics we discussed in the comments below. And if you got value from the video, it would mean the world to us if you hit the like button and subscribe to the HR Morning channel. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Voices of HR.